Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Key, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker here with my co-presenter, Leslie Cunningham. And we are going to present to you today 5 key strategies for strengthening your relationships. I have been a licensed clinical social worker for 15 years and been in practice in Boulder, private practice for 10 years. I specialize in adolescents, women in transition, adoption and attachment, and relationships. So I'm super excited to talk to you about this today. It's a subject that I'm passionate about, and I'd love for Leslie to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Leslie Cunningham, and I actually have been in community mental health for the last 25 years. And in that capacity, I actually was a therapist for adolescents, but then became a supervisor for just about every facet of mental health needs, including geriatric and infant attachment. So I am now in private practice and am working mostly with couples, families, relationship sort of oriented work with kids and their parents, and any variation on relationship strategies. I too am very interested in attachment as the foundation of relationship. So it's really wonderful to be here and talk to you guys, and hopefully you'll send in some questions for us if you have any, and we'll get started. So the first slide that you're looking at is called Enhanced Connection Through Understanding Attachment Style. So attachment is a very sort of heavy-duty sounding word that has become a buzzword in the last, actually for me, I've known about it in my field in the last 15, 20 years. But it's so critical if you think about it in terms of relationships. So attachment style is how you operate in the world in relationship to other people. And you heard about it, about whether babies were attached to their moms or not. So I thought attachment was about babies. Yes, it's totally about babies. And we all learn our attachment style very, very young. And in fact, in the first 4 years of life, our attachment sort of becomes the template for how we do relationships for the rest of our lives. So, for example, if we have a mom who is unavailable for some reason, meaning she may be depressed or sad or not having a good relationship with her partner or any of those things, it can interfere with attachment, as well as a child who is born with illness and is away in the hospital for a long period of time. That said, it doesn't mean any of those things can ruin attachment. It just means that it might affect, in the end, how attachment happens. So there are a lot of different styles of attachment. There's an anxious attachment, there's a avoidant attachment, and this sort of back and forth where you come forward and go back, and that's all about what happened in your very early days. So attachment is also the petri dish for trust. So what we know about attachment is how people responded to us as children and as babies is totally going to affect our ability to trust others. So an example of that, when in terms of a baby, is a child cries. They're laying in the bed crying, and a mom walks over, looks in the bed and goes, "Oh goodness, what is this? I'm not sure why she's crying." She picks her up, checks her diaper, offers her a bottle, doesn't know yet why the baby is crying, and just holds her. And eventually the baby feels soothed or like she's being cared for. So what happened in that little relationship pattern is that the baby learns to trust that I cry and someone comes over and checks me out. It doesn't mean you have to hold her for the entire cry period. It just means that you address the need. Hopefully you figure it out over time what it is the crying is about, because the more often you're right, the better the child's trust in you to understand their needs. Now, that same idea, if you think about it, goes through teenagers, it goes through adults, it goes through elderly people. do I trust the people around me to meet my needs? And that is something that was planted as a seed when you were a very young child. So let's say perhaps it wasn't good enough. Perhaps it didn't help. You'll notice that sometimes you have a difficulty connecting with people. You just feel a little off. You find yourself really wanting to be more or less avoidant of people because attachment can be threatening to you. But on the other hand, if it was good enough attachment, which is the second bullet here, good enough attachment, which is most of us in the universe have had good enough attachment, then we are able to connect in a more easy manner. Doesn't mean it's always perfect. It doesn't mean we don't sometimes not trust the people around us, because there's also a healthy lack of trust in kind of getting to know people. You probably have even met people who just rush up to you and are very attached immediately, and then you're wondering why you don't know me. So it gives you an idea about how that works. Yes, there's a note here about attachment disordered child. Yes, it's very, very difficult. And it's sad too, because you are in the midst of it all, trying so hard to meet children's needs and not able to do so. It's really difficult. There are techniques that are better or worse for that. And we can talk about them later if we have time, or, however this works out. How do I know how it's affecting me now? So if you're a person who's kind of a serial relationship person, meaning you get connected with somebody and then you move on, and then you connect and you move on, I would guess that attachment might be part of that issue. It may not be all of it. There's also a thing called boredom, which may or may not have anything to do with attachment. But ultimately, how you connect with other people is so important. For Jenny and I as therapists, our attachment style shows up in our therapy. How do we connect with our clients? How do we move on when it's time for them to leave? So even saying goodbye or terminating a relationship of any kind, even friendships or old boyfriends or those sorts of things, are also sort of affected deeply by how your attachment is. If you think it's a problem, how do I change it? Well, one of the things is recognizing it and knowing that, ow, this hurts when I'm with another person, or lack of trust. That would probably be the biggest way that I would know that I'm not attached in a really healthy way to someone, that I never trust them. I never want to reveal parts of myself. I'm holding in that which is the deepest part of me. So that has everything to do with being intimate. And I'm obviously not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about, do you know me? Do you know my soul? Do you know my heart? What hurts me? And avoid those things as you would with an infant. One would never walk in the room and purposefully stick a pin in an infant's foot. No, you would pick them up and love them. But as we get older, sometimes relationships are so complicated that people actually intentionally hurt other people because they don't know any other way to relate when things are difficult. If you know it's a problem, there are people who specialize in attachment. I am one of those. Jenny's one of those. But you can look them up on websites and just type in attachment disorder. And most or many therapists these days who work with families or kids have some training in attachment disorders. One of my favorite authors on attachment work and family work is Daniel Hughes. And if you have a chance to look through any of his writing, I've done lots of training, intensive training with him, you will enjoy reading something about it. He explains attachment much better than I have in this short amount of time. But his book, Attachment Focused Parenting, is a really nice book on how to work on these issues with your own children. As far as a more higher level book, Attachment Focused Therapy is his book for clinicians. So let's move to the next slide. Empathy, the mirror of the heart. Empathy is an amazing part of attachment. And that's where the true intimacy and that feeling of knowing someone comes from. These are actually my two grandsons, and while they look very sweet and lovely in this picture facing the Pacific Ocean, they do fight. They're 2 years apart. And I think you can see here a tender moment between the two of them when actually they seem to understand each other quite deeply. So if you know what's in my heart, you know me, the real intimacy in relationships. So most of us don't have a very good vocabulary when it comes to feelings and to how to express feelings. And so in relationships, we use shorthands or we don't say anything at all. Anger is probably the easiest emotion for most people to pull out of their hat. And in that is so many other things. Anger is the tip of the iceberg. And underneath that iceberg, the part that ripped open the Titanic, is sadness, fear, frustration, all these other feelings that are far more potent if you think about talking about them. Empathy itself is when I say to you, I see you sad, I see you frightened, even though the presenting emotion is anger. That's the emotion that most people find very easy to express. So if you were to say to me, I know you're angry about that, when in fact, I am showing nothing but disgust for everything. And then I say, you look so frightened about that TV show, just scared the heck out of you. And now you don't know what to do. How are you going to go to bed? So you're arguing with me about going to bed. Of course you are. It's scary to go to bed after you've watched something so frightening. So what I'm doing is mirroring for my child who is saying to me, no, I'm not going to bed after the movie I shouldn't have let her watch. What I'm doing is mirroring for her the feelings that are in her heart. And what she then knows about that is, wow, she really gets me. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, you get it. And so then I say, do you need a little extra time? And we can read a book downstairs first, and then we'll transition upstairs or something along those lines. That's what you would do with a child. With an adult, the empathy really goes to your partner has become very quiet. They're not really relating to you as much as you have been used to them relating to you. So perhaps you already know something about why that might be. So sometimes people find it hard to really come out and say, I'm really scared about my job. I don't know if I'm going to have a job in a week. And then what will we do about money? And especially for men, that sense of being the breadwinner and the person who takes care of his family, it becomes very difficult to allow that sort of vulnerability to be in there, to allow anyone to know how very frightened they are. But that's something as a wife or a partner you can say, gosh, honey, it makes me very scared, and I'm wondering if you're feeling scared. So curiosity is just a wonderful way of saying, I am really interested in what makes you tick, what's making things hard for you today. How can I help you? That's how empathy happens. Now, many of us were not, by the way, empathized with by our parents, but hopefully sometime in our lifetime, we've had that mirroring from someone who means a lot to you. In my case, it was more my father. I had some excellent teachers who also were very good at empathy and understanding struggles at school. So we learn it from each other. And the more we practice it, the more it becomes an easy thing to do. At first, it feels stiff and kind of goofy to say, oh, honey, you're feeling so sad because you lost your job, instead of just mirroring the anger. It can feel odd and stilted. Children might even say, you're patronizing me, or you're being silly, Mom, or any of those things, but it doesn't mean you stop doing it. It just means you go slowly. So another part of relationships that can sort of get in the way is expectations. I have found this to be true over and over and over again. And most of us grew up in a world of what is it like to be a man? What is it like to be a woman? What's it like to be married? What is it like to have babies? The first baby I ever held in my arms was my own. And the idea of what that baby was like was completely ridiculous. The same is true of relationships when all you know about relationships you've read in books or seen on TV or experienced that are not good relationships. So when you meet someone, you're going to have these expectations. Some of them are early childhood things about princes and princesses and frogs and kisses and trundle, what am I trying to, the creatures under the bridge and trolls. There they are, trolls under the bridge. And Billy Goat Gruff wasn't exactly a nice guy. So that's what we grow up with. And of course, our parents are our primary and most principal models for what relationships are. So if you grew up in a family where mom was always meeting dad's needs and dad is the guy who sits in the easy chair with a beer in his hand, although I don't know too many of those relationships anymore. Those are kind of old fashioned, but if that's what you witnessed, you might actually want to do that. I've seen it actually happen that people play out the exact same roles their parents played out and then wonder, why is my marriage not working? Why is he looking so much like my dad did? And it's because you have fallen into the patterns and the expectations from some time ago. And along with those expectations are the fairy tale idea that this person is going to meet all your needs, that you will not feel lonely, that you will never have emptiness, that you will always feel like loved and cherished, and all these things that are in myths and fantasies. So I'm talking about how that can affect your relationship. So if you expect your partner to always meet your needs and they don't, you spend a lot of time being disappointed. Now that gets expressed as anger. And most of the time there's a lot of fighting about things that are not at all what the fighting is about. It might be over, did you pick up the cleaning? Did you make that phone call I asked you to do? And a lot of women can turn into the moms for their husbands and their partners because they want them or expect them to meet all their needs about doing chores and being able to be handymen, when maybe that isn't at all what they're good at or what they are organized to do. So therein lies lots of disappointment, lots of anger, and relationships come in like that. I see that actually pretty often, where the expectations are actually very much at the root of the problem. And again, this goes back to attachment. Did I attach to my parents in a way that allowed me to be independent, or am I now a dependent person? And I expect my partner to, again, meet all my needs. So as a parent, I put this slide in here because even as this is another issue I see a lot of, is people who grow up to be 18, 19, 20 and have no idea how to be an adult. So when we do helicopter parenting, which is very overbearing, sort of micromanagement style of parenting, we can create very unrealistic expectations in our children. For example, they can't make decisions, so they expect their partner to. They are unable to have conflict because they're afraid of it. They don't know what it is. If someone gets mad at them, they interpret it as a very bad thing, when in fact it may be the most necessary thing. And then never being disappointed. I've known parents who will do anything to keep their child from disappointment. I'm thinking about one parent I know who bought all the tickets for a child to make sure that she would win this contest so that she could be queen of an organization. And when I say that, I'm talking $15,000, $20,000 he spent on these tickets so that she would not A, have to go out and sell them herself, and B, she would become queen of this event. So A, she didn't learn how to go out and present herself and become good at sales. B, it wasn't realistic. What about all those kids who did go out and sell on their own, and a dad who jumps in and does this? The probably one of the expectations around conflict. I've met many, many people who are conflict avoidant. And for myself, that's always been a struggle as well, because in my household, I grew up and conflict was kind of hot. And it scared me because my temperament is pretty mild and low key. So being around conflict was uncomfortable. So my pattern as a child was to disappear and go read a book in a tree. So do I do that now? I have to fight that urge. As an adult, I have to fight the urge to go somewhere else and do something else rather than have conflict. So that's how, when you know these things are true for you, that you change them. And you have to do it in a safe environment with a person that you love and trust, to be able to learn how to do some of these things. So when I come back to the idea of helicopter parenting, let children make decisions for themselves. Give them the choices that are there before them. If they make a mistake, there are natural consequences that happen. Some can be painful, obviously not dangerous. We don't ever let children make decisions that are in a safety way dangerous. So preventing healthy conflict is the other thing. How do you do that in a home? You're in a home. It's the main thing is that the parent is never part of the conflict. The parent, except as a moderator and as someone who discusses and directs. And is that something all of us can do all of the time? No, of course not. And sometimes we have to leave the room. Sometimes we have to go splash water in our face in the bathroom, whatever, in order to be the person who is in control of the situation so the conflict doesn't get out of control. Children learn how to do conflict in their families. And disappointment. Disappointment is part of life. And it's important that children learn that from an early age, how to deal with it, how to manage it. Along with that goes boredom. I didn't put that bullet there, and I should have. Children who never know how to do anything on their own when they're bored. Loneliness and boredom are not bad things. They are things that are times when people actually can reflect on themselves and understand things and process information that they've had all day or all week or all year. And it sort of sifts down and becomes an important part of their judgment foundation for the rest of their lives. I do see these days lots of kids who have never experienced boredom. Their parents are running around making sure they are in activities. They're overcommitted, exhausted children who really have no focus when that happens. So it leads to poor conflict resolution skills, yes, and unrealistic expectations about life being easy, that life will be just the way it's been in their families, and that other person, this is the dependency part, will be the person who gives them everything. Gosh, my parents did. My parents made everything work for me. Why would my partner not do that? Why would I even think of having to make enough money to support my own shopping habit or my own need to fly out to Seattle? So, and then the lack of empathy comes when parents do everything for you, answer every question for you, never ever are curious about why things happen in a child. Children do everything for a reason. There's always a reason behind behavior. So if, as a parent, we never know why, then we're not teaching empathy. We're not showing empathy. So what happens with a child as they grow up is they really don't know who they are and whether I am being accepted or not. They don't understand that in the sense that other people don't really reflect for them their needs and what they want. Acceptance. Here's my other little grandson and his dog, Mia. And I used him because that dog has been mauled, and it's not him that's being accepting, it's the dog, has been mauled. She's had the entire doctor kit used on her, and she is still the most loving, accepting dog ever. Of course, golden retrievers are known for that. Acceptance is a huge part of relationship strategy that all of you have to have, loving someone, carbuncles and all. So that goes back to the expectations again. So if I accept someone truly and with all my heart, it's looking at what they do right, 10 times more than what they do wrong. And if they do something wrong, it's not the biggest thing in the world, and it doesn't need to be a shaming moment where you walk in and tell them what seriously silly people they are, that they thought that was the right thing to do. I know that there are people who are very sensitive to criticism, and acceptance is the way to get around that and help them understand that you accept even the hard parts of them, the things. And I've not known a relationship ever where everything is hunky-dory and marvelous. It takes a level of maturity and time and the ability to talk out these things. For example, I actually am married to a guy who is pretty easy about picking up messes, for example. And I, on the other hand, like things to be really neat. It occurred to me one day, why would he pick it up? It's not his deal. It's my deal. My deal is to pick up messes. So instead of nagging him or bugging him, I pick them up because it's much more important to me than it is to him. Now, does that not show him what I need? Yes. And he is far more aware now than he was that that's an important factor for me. But I didn't spend a lot of time lecturing him or nagging him about that a neatness and a picking up is important to me. And again, learning how to prioritize what's important. What's important for me as a person is to be loved and to be cherished by a person. The fact that he doesn't pick up his socks and put them in the laundry basket is not real high up on my priority list. So what I love about being with my husband is his gentle, caring nature that comes through no matter what's going on. And that is a sit-down moment that each of us has to take some time and recognize that what is it that I really love about this person once the fairy tale part of the relationship has gone away. What is it that's important to me about him? Perhaps he's a wonderful father. Perhaps he's a wonderful provider. And with each of those goes something else. If he's a wonderful father, he may spend more time with the children than he does with you. So how do you reconcile that in your needs? Well, I thought that was one of your priorities, that you want him to be a wonderful father. So how do you make that work? You understand then that this is a priority that you yourself has. That was an expectation, and he actually is meeting it. But he can't meet everything. He can't do everything. He can't get the garage cleaned up on Saturday if he's going out on a hike with your kids. Getting tripped up by expectations is when that happens. Absolutely. There's a question on here about you're not referring to people accepting verbal or emotional abuse, though. Absolutely not. Never, never. Any kind of emotional abuse or physical or any of that goes back to safety and danger. Those are always things we prioritize as critical in a relationship. I'm making an assumption that those things aren't present. So in a relationship that is absent of physical and emotional abuse, these are the things that you make a decision about what's important. And if there is a verbal or physical or emotional abuse, it's important to get help from someone who is skilled with those kinds of issues and working to resolve those issues. Thanks for asking that question.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, everyone, this is Jenny, and I want to talk to you a little bit about self-care, which I think we can roll into easily after some of the ways that Leslie has helped us understand attachment and expectations and acceptance, because I find a lot in my work as a therapist, so I struggle with this personally, and I hear moms talking about this, parents talking about this a lot with both their kids and their partners, that they do such a good job of knowing what everyone else needs that they forget about what they need, which puts the relationship in a difficult place in terms of balance. I'm going to read you a quote that I found. We've all heard the oxygen mask metaphor about how we often forget, we care so much about others that we forget to put on our own oxygen mask first. And when I was looking for that quote, preparing for this presentation, I found a really interesting spin on it. So you guys can read it, but I'll go ahead and read it to you. In the event of an oxygen shortage on airplanes, mothers of young children are always reminded to put on their own oxygen mask first to better assist the children with theirs. The same tactic is necessary on terra firma. There's no way of sustaining our children if we don't first rescue ourselves. I don't call that selfish behavior, I call it love. Joyce Maynard. So when I talk about self-care, I see sort of two polarities in relationships that happen. One, either people that are incredible givers and they're giving all the time and they're lacking self-care. A lot of the parents that I work with are so gracious in bringing their children to me because they see their child struggling and they just want more than anything for their child to feel better. But when I suggest that maybe they get support, they have a hard time with that concept because for them, they just want everything they have to go to their children. So I see that. And then I also see sort of the other extreme of parents, partners in relationships, coworkers even. I see this a lot in jobs where we've given so much or where something else is going on and we get kind of burnt out. So then we go the other way and we focus so much on self-care that it becomes an imbalanced relationship from that perspective. So if you're feeling imbalanced in your relationship, whatever relationship that is, it can come up in friendships. As Leslie talked about, our attachment styles show up across the board. So whatever relationship is sort of plaguing you the most right now, that you're finding is in your awareness the most, ask yourself, what is it you need to be present, to not always be thinking about past arguments with someone, past interactions that didn't go well, things that aren't right, or thinking about the future and having worries about things that might not go well. What do you need to be present and enjoy the relationship for while it's here at this time? So I ask people, the brain is really an interesting thing when it comes to attachment because our brains teach us that just like food, water, and air, attachment is essential for us to survive. And if we fear that an attachment will be lost, that our brains can go into these really wonky places where sometimes we don't even recognize ourselves. And we go into sort of a low-grade, long-term fight or flight mode. And that's when Leslie was talking to you about just getting reactive, getting defensive, getting angry, when really that's the tip of the iceberg. There are things under that that are fueling that emotion. So I think if you can make a list and start writing and dialoguing with yourself. The writing gets you out of that loop that we sometimes get into in our brains that's just purely about survival, and there's a need that's not getting met. So the writing will help you to ground yourself a little bit before you try to talk to another person about this. It's just a way of reflecting for yourself. So make a list of your needs and desires. And what I would recommend here when you're making this list, I hear this a lot. I have such amazing parents that I work with. And one mom came to me one day and said, so I've made my list, and my list is I need for my husband to, or I need for my son to. And that is a very normal reaction that we have as humans. We can see sort of in our environment the things that don't fit well, and we make it about what the other person is doing. But before you go there and in changing someone else's behaviors, what if I said to you, let's wave a magic wand and you can have whatever you want? And the person says, well, I just want peace. I want a peaceful morning. So let's look at all the ways that you could maybe write down that you could have that, and where that desire comes from. And I'll get into that in a minute. Another question I would ask yourself in terms of being truly present are the relationships that are in your life right now that are either going well or not going well. Do they support who you are in your essential nature? I work a lot with my teenagers on their masks that they show, because teenagers are great at this, right? They're exploring their identity and they try on different hairstyles, different friendships, different online profiles. I mean, they're really super great at this. But all of us develop based on our attachment styles, based on our childhood and our needs and the things we most want. We develop different masks that we show to people. So what I would ask is, how many of your relationships really support the essential you? I can't tell you how many introverts seem to find me, and I'm a true introvert as well. As much as I enjoy talking to and working with people, I do need my quiet time, my downtime, and I can't tell you how many people don't understand their own sort of basic needs. Are they an extrovert and they do need more contact with their friendships, with their family members in order to feel recharged, in order for their battery to feel energized? Or are they an introvert and they need to have some quiet time, some downtime, and their lives are so packed that they feel like they don't have time for that. So I would just maybe ask yourself, and people like Leslie and I or a trusted friend can certainly help you explore, what is your true nature? Because in order to take care of yourself, and then in order to take that to someone else and ask them to partner with you in a healthy dynamic and relationship, I would say you need to really understand your own true nature and then be willing to explore that and communicate that to those around you. Another technique that I recommend when you're talking about what you need in the present moment, and it sounds very cliche, but I promise you, if you commit to it, it does work, to just find something that's going well. And if there's a relationship that needs strengthening that isn't going quite as well right now, to find some gratitude for what is going well. And I mean, there are many pop culture references that refer to this. There was a movie out several years ago, The Secret, and one of my girls just found that last week and watched it. And she said, you know, I tried it out and it sounds cheesy, but it really works. And she even reminded me that there are some very basic concepts in pop culture that we overlook, but ways that you can just say thank you for why the relationship is in your life right now, even if it's causing you some strife or not necessarily meeting your needs. And that's also a way that you can take a quiet moment for yourself every day and remind yourself that this is something that you're choosing and that you can be grateful for. And that takes me to the next point, which is, I hear so often people saying, and it's really true, I mean, depending on your belief systems, and I don't want to get too ethereal here, but we really don't necessarily have a choice in who our parents are. So the people that come into our lives that are our blood relatives teach us many, many lessons that can be very positive and fulfilling, but also that can leave some places that we need to work on or explore or understand better. So if you do have a situation, I mean, I work with this so often with teens, they say, I didn't necessarily choose this. My dad and I are so different, and they struggle with how to love their parents, how to have a healthy relationship, but also feel good about their independence and who they are. I try to teach them where they have choices in the matter. And I would say this would go for relationships also, you know, choosing your partner. And even if things aren't going well, but there's no easy solution in the moment, recognizing, but I did choose this person, and I'm learning X, Y, and Z from this person. And this is the path that I'm on, and this is where I want to grow and want to devote my time. So try to empower yourself and take care of yourself a little bit by reminding yourself that you do, in all relationships, at least have a choice in how you view the relationship and also how you commit yourself to the relationship. And sometimes with self-care, I remind people that being open to a relationship and committing to your relationship might mean saying no, might mean knowing your limits. It might mean knowing what you actually can't do and what would compromise you if you gave into that. So one example might be, Leslie talked about her husband. So let's use a lighthearted example. So one example might be, you know, maybe he has other things that are more important to him. And as much as he loves her, he just repeatedly cannot commit to picking up the socks. And so they both know that. And again, this is a lighthearted example, but they both know what the other is capable of doing and what they are not capable of doing. And from there, they can develop a partnership where everyone is being truthful. So sometimes being open does mean saying no. Okay, so that takes me to, let's examine our motives for our needs. So before, I think a lot of times we're a very sort of, most of us are super busy, especially with technology. We have a lot of forms of instant gratification. So before, I always really invite people to sit with, part of taking care of yourself is taking care of your relationship, but it's understanding and knowing yourself. And Leslie talked a lot about how it's difficult for us sometimes to resource ourselves or meet our own needs. And I find that that leads to a lot of compulsivity in reaching out to others and trying to get others to meet our needs for us, thinking, well, I will just be happy if this person calls me back, or if this person commits to what they said they were going to do at work, or if my child follows through for once with their chores or even brushing their teeth, I'm not asking for much. I hear that a lot. I'm not asking for much. This is in everybody's best interest. So how can we just make this happen? So I think that learning a little bit of endurance and tolerance for your own inner turmoil will help you to strengthen your relationships incredibly, because we all have it and we all have different tolerance levels for it. And one of the things that helps me personally tolerate some emotions, I tend to be an anxious person. So when I get anxiety and I want something to just be resolved, for me to tolerate my own worry, my own anxiety, is to remember that I need to look at why I want the things that I want. So before you make a request of someone else, before you attempt to change the relationship or change the dynamics, I would just remind you and invite you to maybe look at, why do I need these things? So for example, if you're seeing a consistent need for your child to brush his teeth and get out of the house on time, we're late to school every day, it's not good habits, I'm not being a good parent if I can't get my child to school every day. What does time mean to you? Look at your own sort of past patterns with time. Has being on time been really important to you and that's allowed you to be successful? Was there something, and again, this is more of a lighthearted example, but I'm going to go ahead and say, was there something in your past where it really didn't work well for you and someone let you down because they weren't on time? I mean, yes, we all want our kids to get to school on time. And yes, I would agree that long-term lateness to school is a bigger issue that we would need to look at. But before just saying, well, this is a proper parenting tool and I need to expect this of my child, just really understand it, because what that will do is help you understand you and validate yourself a little bit. So there's probably a lot of inner turmoil maybe you're having around getting your child to school. So validate yourself and say, okay, I get this. I understand why I'm feeling this way. But then also validate your child and maybe not make it so much of a tense subject between you, which opens up the space for a little bit more creativity between you of what's really going on and why the little tyke can't get his teeth brushed and get out the door on time every morning. So I talked about past patterns, and what can happen sometimes is we get sort of so used to relating, we understand ourselves and we start to think about what we need, and then we don't realize that sometimes our relationships all sort of, Leslie talked about serial relationships and repeat patterns. But if you look around and you find that you have, I remember working with a woman that was in her 40s, and she just kept saying to me session after session, everyone treats me this way. My friends, my mother, my coworkers, my whole life I've been treated this way. But where she was a little blocked is in seeing the dynamics that what she was doing that was possibly putting other people on the defensive, and maybe not hearing her true heart and maybe not understanding what she was needing. And she had to look at her expectations a little bit, but that's where maybe there are certainly things that we can sort of read to support ourselves in understanding our own patterns and our own past, but also maybe look to an outside provider like Leslie or myself, or a close friend even that knows you well enough to tell you the truth and not just tell you what you want to hear, and just say, yeah, I have sort of noticed this in you, and I do worry about you because I know how important your friendships or your relationships are to you. So understanding past patterns, I think, is helpful in examining your motives for why you need something. And it might soften, maybe change a little bit what your needs end up after you look at all of that. I already talked about sitting with it and how we desire immediate gratification. And what I mean by sitting with it is just have it in the back of your mind. Do not ignore yourself. Do not ignore your needs. That's not what I'm saying with this bullet point. What I'm more suggesting is have it in your awareness, hold it lightly, have a vision of kind of holding it lightly in your hand as you go about your day, and check in with yourself. Use whatever, if you have a method of grounding yourself. Some people use meditation. Some people do go to therapy. Some people sit and and journal. But if there's something going on in your life, I know we're all really busy and it's hard to take those 5 minutes a day to just sit down with yourself and not even think necessarily, because I think we all tend to get in our frontal lobes and we try to use logic to problem solve our way. But just ask yourself, what am I feeling? What do I need? I feel down. I feel sad. I'm sad about this relationship. And I see this a lot in my teens. They are so quick to try to escape those emotions. They just want to do whatever they can to get out of it. And it's a symptom of depression. We all want to get rid of it as soon as possible. It's one of the ways you know that your brain is just having a little bit of a struggle with feeling sadness and depression. And what I would say to that is learn, again, that emotional tolerance of knowing that it's there, knowing that you're working on it, but not having it control your every thought and your logic, so that bigger, deeper awarenesses can come up and maybe ideas can happen. So with that goes along with, I can't preach this enough. It's hard when you're trying to work through something. Your body has a lot of adrenaline. I talked about that sort of low grade fight or flight that we all tend to get into, especially if we're arguing a lot with our kids, our spouses, our coworkers. So exercise, I can't stress that enough. You have to move your body. You know, there's so many times that I absolutely don't want to make time. And then I finally take 10 minutes, just 10 minutes to go for a quick run. And all of a sudden a problem will be solved, because I'll get this flash of, oh, I'll bet this person's feeling that. And I didn't get that before. Oh, I'll bet I need this. And I didn't understand that. So exercising, eating right, and getting enough sleep. Again, I tend to spin a little bit at night, and my sweet husband always tells me, this is your worst time to make a decision. This is your worst time to process. I love you, but let's put this conversation on hold until tomorrow. So I would recommend to everyone, I mean, as much as possible, getting the sleep that you need, eating right, and exercising, taking care of yourself before making a decision about your relationship. Okay, so exploring the ways to meet your needs. I always have people write down their options for how to feel more satisfied. What are the things that you can do? So do you need help with someone taking your kids so that you can go out and exercise more? Do you need, again, we go back to, it's very easy to kind of look at others and say, okay, if you could do this, this, and this, I would feel so much better. But before you make a request of someone else, just look at the ways that maybe you may not be meeting your own needs or prioritizing, which I can talk about in a minute, of how to feel more satisfied. So make a list, and next to each thing that you need, write 3 different solutions to what may make that better. Approach the other person. So if you do decide after all of this, you've done all of your work, you've talked to your therapist, you've meditated, you've gone to yoga, you've made plenty of time for yourself, and then finally you still decide, okay, but I have a request. I'm seeing some comments here that I love. I love Zumba therapy. That's awesome. Yes, I can't say that enough. So I just wanted to share with everyone that if you can't see this comment, that one of our listeners is recommending Zumba therapy. It's great. So before you approach the other person, it sounds, again, very trivial, but we all forget active listening skills. To say to someone, I'm really feeling sad when this happens, instead of when you do this, I feel this, because we need to take responsibility for our own feelings and our own situations. So saying, okay, this situation, I'm finding a lot of sadness. I'm doing everything I can to take care of myself, but I need your help with this. Parents, I can't stress this enough. I give this rule all the time. When you are saying, I feel, parents love, and kids are not great at talking, so parents love to fill in the gap. Keep your feelings to 2 sentences or less. And I know that is really, really hard, but I just, again, would encourage active listening. Stop after you've shared what you've said or make a request. Let the other person respond, and then reflect back to them. Okay, so what I just heard you say is this, and literally repeat back exactly what you heard them say so that they know that you're hearing them. And then validate the other person's feelings, and ask that your feelings be validated. So let's talk about those requests. Especially I find, and I don't mean to stereotype because I love all my gals that I work with, but I find that women have a lot of difficulty with making specific requests in a relationship. We are so good at sharing and oversharing some more. And we have a hard time just saying, it would really help me out if you could take the kids on Thursday night so I could go to Zumba therapy with my girlfriends. Can you accommodate my request? And then the other person gets to say yes or no, and everyone gets to be truthful. Be open to and incorporate the person's response. So in a relationship, there are three entities. There's you, there's the other person, and there's us. There's the third entity that we have to be thinking about. And in that becomes usually a beautiful way to connect with someone. And it's not always going to look like you want it to look. And they may not, your husband may say, no, actually Thursday night, I really wanted a guy's night. So then from there, everyone's being honest. And instead of saying, well, if you love me, you would do this and you would support this either through your direct communication or your nonverbal communication, you could say, wow, that's really cool that you were honest about that. And from there, you can go on to have an honest conversation. So if you find that in your relationships and in trying to take care of yourself, you keep having the same conversation and you are still feeling depleted, I would just encourage you perhaps to look at a role change and look at feeling maybe just you don't remove yourself from the situation, but you consider how you involve yourself in the situation. Understand that other people might need time to process and grow. So how can you take care of yourself while the other person does their work and takes care of themselves? And lastly, be your own best friend. My sweet mom, I have a really great mom, but she always taught me growing up to be your own best friend, to take care of yourself, to learn what you need and meet your own needs through all of this and stick by yourself. Okay, so we all probably recognize this picture. It looks like a lot of our lives and you're trying to balance everything. So how do you prioritize? One thing that I want to say when you look at your inner octopus is that overcommitting is something that often we do. We don't know how to say no. Our friends are important. I hear this a lot with my 20-somethings. Our friends are important. You know, I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my husband. But really, by giving too much and spreading too thin, you're not giving your whole self to each relationship. So look at your relationships and find out where you could pare down a little bit, where you could just for temporarily, maybe this friend is going to have to wait for a few months because I need to focus on this problem with my kid. Are you expecting too much in some of your relationships and not enough and not enough in others? So again, where are you asking too much of your kids and not enough of maybe your best friend who could help you with your kids or coworkers, etc.? Are we trying to do it all? So remember that relationships are there for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So understanding, is this relationship one that is here for a lifetime? And if so, maybe that'll help you prioritize how much energy you're investing now versus someone that comes in to just teach you, a friend that comes in to teach you a very quick lesson in life, but then you go on and go your separate ways and you love each other from afar. So we've all probably seen or heard this picture. I think it's really profound. And I just want to give a reminder here with prioritizing, focus on your key relationships. As you can see, there's an empty jar and there are some rocks, some pebbles, and some sands. Or some sand, excuse me. So I think a lot of times people try to put too many labels on their rocks. And our rocks are really our important relationships. And I can't tell you enough. Write this down, talk it over with your partner if you have one, if your best friend is your partner, if your parents, figure out who are your rocks and how do you focus. And the pebbles are actually things that are necessary now, like our jobs. We all need to work in order to survive in this culture. And at the same time, do we make that more of a rock than a pebble? And how can we maybe manage our time a little differently so that we're supporting our pebbles are just filling in the gaps around the rocks, but the rocks are our main focus. And what is the sand? What are the things that maybe we're running around and we're doing? A parent network that we're involved in that we really want to stay connected with other parents, but it might be actually taking away from time from our kids. And are you perceiving things, again, look at your perceptions and your motives. Are you perceiving things in your life to be rocks when they are actually pebbles or sand? And that helping, and this isn't an easy task, everyone. I want you to just be really gentle with yourselves and do this over time. Quick changes don't tend to bring out or strengthen our relationships because they're not authentic to us. So Allow your feelings to show you a little bit the path to healthy connections. Without realizing it, many of us, and I've talked about this a lot, and I think we run into this a lot here in Boulder, but really it's our culture in America, is to compulsively do. And when we do, sometimes we're just a little bit, we have a difficulty sitting down with ourselves, letting there be emptiness, not just compulsively cleaning or filling in every single moment. So again, trusting yourself to analyze a little bit and look at, why do we do? What will happen if we're less busy? And then others don't do enough. We're unmotivated. We're underwhelmed by life. And so we keep ourselves a little bit safe from relationships. So maybe we could strengthen our relationships by not isolating as much, for reaching out a little bit, being a little bit vulnerable. And then nurture yourself when you realize that these emotions are behind some of your behaviors, and utilize them as a way to explore deeper connections with other people. Okay, so we only have about 5 minutes, and I realize I'm just sort of rushing here. Again, I love this stuff, so I could go on and on, as I'm sure Leslie could too. And I'd love for Leslie to jump in, but the final positive note is just playfulness and creativity. Here is a ziplining picture, and I think, especially in Boulder, we can all recognize this picture. I know a lot of great parents that are super good about getting their kids out and exposing them to new activities. So if you haven't taken the plunge on a zip line, I would recommend it. Do something different. But I love this picture because I love dogs, but also because this dog is just totally chilling out in the grass. And I can't tell you how many times a week I give this homework to parents, to kids, to friendships. Sit in the grass, go have a picnic, sit down with each other, and just make the time to hang out and maybe not be quite as busy. Okay, so in thinking outside of the box, maybe suggest something new. I hear a lot of parents do that with their kids, and they get so disappointed when their kids are like, I don't feel like doing that. I don't want to be with you. So maybe suggest something that's a little bit different. And if they're not up for it, ask them what they would like. So request new activities without demanding. Try to get ideas from your kids, from your partner. It's so easy. I mean, we all fall into this routine of go to work, come home, maybe go to the gym, pick the kids up, make dinner, go to bed. We fall into bed exhausted. But if you really just try to put it on your calendar and schedule it as if it were your job, then those rocks in your relationship become a little bit more important. Laugh more. I can't tell you how many times my kids and my teenagers, my clients that I work with, laugh about their blunders, about the things that they are making mistakes on. And we'll go ahead and say sometimes, or I'll say to some of my kids, wow, that didn't go so hot, huh? Like, it wasn't quite what you're going for with that. But we just laugh at their mistakes, not as a way of taking away from the seriousness of a big mistake, but just as a way of being human in a situation. So even in serious situations, I tell parents, without laughing it off or dismissing their emotions, I don't mean that. I mean, find a way with your kid, to join with your kid, to be funny, to make a joke and make life not quite so serious. Let's see. So,
Jenny, I loved listening to the part about the rocks and the sands and the pebbles. That was a marvelous. I actually haven't ever seen that picture.
No?
No.
Okay, cool.
So I'm loving it. It didn't say what the jar was. What's the jar?
The jar is you. You're the container, basically, and your life, your soul, your fulfillment in life. That's what I would say the jar is a metaphor for. So how are you finding your fulfillment?
Well, and I'm guessing if you fill it up with sand, your fulfillment is full of trivia. And if you fill it up with rocks, it's too heavy to pick up. So I guess a little bit of everything would be the important, right?
Yeah, I love that.
The takeaway. So you taught me something today too. Thanks. I loved hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the lightness is really important. I think Leslie's right. We all have to find a balance in all of this. So I would just encourage you to take what feels true for you from this and leave the rest. And some final things I'll say about the playfulness is the balance that Leslie's talking about, the doing. When you move with someone, you don't necessarily have to talk about deep things in order to connect. Your brain releases serotonin, which helps you feel happier, lighter. Oxytocin helps you to bond with each other. Don't necessarily have agendas. Take a break from your seriousness and connect. and then that being. And I find a lot of times, especially with our partners, I just had this in a session recently this week where a girl was like, I'm going to go talk to my partner about this because this is the next time we're going to be together and this is the next chance I'll have. I said, why don't you just hang out and have a good time and maybe put it on the back burner? So, try to get to know the other person and get curious and fun. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time today. And as always, Leslie and I are available for questions if you have them after this and to follow up.
Thank you, guys. It was very fun talking about things that we both love and know so well. So hopefully it was helpful to you.